Hello, everyone, and welcome to this project's final webinar for our congenital deaf blindness series. I would like to acknowledge the lands on which we're meeting. So I am on the land of the Whadjuk Noongar Nation, and I would like to acknowledge the lands on which we're all meeting and pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that to any First Nations people watching. The topic of today's webinar is high quality interactions, and we do this from a deaf-blind perspective, but I think the messages are applicable to all of us in our interactions with people. Okay, an overview of today. We'll look at the characteristics of high quality interactions and how you incorporate these into deaf-blind interactions. We'll look at something called an interaction cycle and the strategies used in that. And throughout the webinar, there will be video and photo examples. And I'll end with some resources and then, of course, our usual question and answer session with the audience. And throughout the slides, I use the abbreviation DB for deaf-blind. So why do we need high quality interactions in our contact with people with deaf blindness? So for all people, including people with deaf blindness, high quality interactions provide a foundation for a secure attachment, social connection, provides a foundation for learning and communication development. And deaf-blind high-quality interactions look and feel different to sighted and hearing ones. And that's why we're paying particular attention to this topic. So as an interaction partner with someone with deaf blindness, you often need to relearn your interaction style or at least tweak your interaction style to be accessible to the person with deaf blindness. And that's what we're going to spend the next 90 minutes exploring. So what are these characteristics? So at the moment, I'm probably just going to list a number of terms that don't mean a lot to you, but we will look at each of them one by one. So we have attunement, we have co-regulation of proximity, we have co-regulation of timing, joint attention, turn taking, and all these things lead to reciprocity or reciprocal interactions. So the first one of those characteristics was attunement. And what does that mean? It means noticing and responding to emotions in a matching or empathetic way. In a lot of our interactions, the caregiver's main modes of responding to emotion are through facial expression, through tone of voice, through the sounds that their voice make or the words that they use, or in deaf culture and deaf interactions, through the gestures and signs that they use. And also there is a degree of touch in attunement, but usually you can see that source of touch. You can see and or hear where that touch is coming from. So how then will a deafblind learner notice these if they're all through or mainly through auditory and visual means? The deafblind learner has fragmented auditory and visual information, receives fragmented auditory and visual information. So how are they going to notice these signs of attunement? How will they notice, or how will they know that their emotions have been noticed by another or by the interaction partner? And we will get to it, but it will take a little bit of time and explanation. So let's look at attunement a little bit more, and what is attunement. So let's look at the scenario of a baby crying. The carer briefly looks towards the baby, picks the baby up and rocks it, and keeps chatting excitedly with the next door neighbour. So does the caregiver notice the baby's crying? Yes, they do, because the carer looks towards the baby and the baby could see that. Do they respond to the crying? Yes, they do. They pick the baby up. But is it matching and empathetic? There's a mismatch in the emotion there because the baby is distressed, but the caregiver is excited and attending to something else. So it's not, there are components of attunement there, but there is also a mismatch of attunement because of the emotion is not reciprocated or acknowledged. The child's emotion is not reciprocated or acknowledged. Let's look at another example. A toddler is laughing at an ant crawling on his hand. He points it out to his carer and keeps laughing. The carer wanders over, looks at the ant and the child and smiles. So does the carer notice? Yes. He notices by going over to the child. He notices by looking at the ant and looking at the child. Does he respond? Yes, he does. He responds with a smile. And is that emotion matched or empathetic? Yes, it is. So the smile reflects the humour and enjoyment of the child. So the second example is true attunement. The first one is a mismatch of attunement. But again, all that attunement happens through visual mode. So the child can see all this happening. What about these in a deafblind example? Is this deafblind attunement? So we've got a deafblind baby is crying, clenching its fists and shuddering. The carer goes over to the baby and says, "Oh, oh, oh," with a concerned face, looks at the baby and picks the baby up. So does the caregiver notice? Yes, they do. But how does the deafblind baby know that? If they can't see the caregiver, they don't know where the caregiver is there. They don't know that the caregiver has come over to them, and they don't know that the caregiver has a concerned expression on their face. How does the deafblind baby know that they have been noticed? Does the caregiver respond? Yes, they do. They pick the baby up. But how does the baby know that that response is in relation to their crying? The baby gets picked up all day long. The baby gets picked up to be fed. The baby gets picked up to be put in their pram. The baby gets picked up to have a nappy change. The baby gets picked up when it's time to go out. So picking up is just a normal part of the day. So how does the baby know that being picked up is in relation to their crying? So there is a response, but the baby doesn't know why. And is it matching or empathetic? Well, yes, it is from a hearing and sighted point of view, because you have the oh, and you have the concerned look, but how can the baby receive that? And with fragmented vision, fragmented hearing, is that message going to be received? Is that attunement going to be noticed? And for two of those things, probably not. So even though that is a hearing and sighted attuned reaction from the caregiver, it's not a deafblind attuned reaction. Let's look at another example. In fact, let's go back and maybe think about how we could improve the attunement in this example of the baby crying. So instead of when the carer goes over, the child's not necessarily going to notice that, but they would be noticed if the carer made physical contact with the baby's body. So yes, you have been noticed, but what are you noticing? Well, maybe I put my hands next to your little fists and I clench them in the same way, and I shudder in the same way that you are shuddering. So then the baby knows you have noticed my crying. You have noticed my crying because you have noticing that in a tactile way. Then the carer could then pick up the child and move them close to them. And then they probably could do the oh, and maybe even the concerned look if those two things were in the realm of hearing and vision of that child. So they could keep them in there. And the closer proximity of after you pick the child up would potentially increase the accessibility of that. But we would have to know more about the baby's hearing and vision to know whether they could perceive that and how well. So now we've got notice because it's been delivered in a tactile way. We've got the response of being picked up, and the two are now linked. I am picking you up because of what I notice you are going through. And is it matching and empathetic? So now then the empathy is there because the concern can be matched to the reason they were picked up. So the oh, and the baby's face, but also possibly even, a little bit of tacking or rocking in the way that the baby, that reflects the way that the baby is moving once they've been picked up. The other example is the toddler is laughing as an aunt is calling on his hand. So same situation as the one we looked at before. He taps his hand and keeps laughing. The carer wanders over, looks at the aunt and the child and laughs. So exactly the same scenario. So let's look at that from a deafblind perspective. Well, has the caregiver noticed? Yes, they have, but the deafblind child probably has no way of knowing that they have been noticed. Does the carer respond? The carer does respond, but again, the deafblind child has no way of knowing that. And is the response matching and empathetic? Yes, it is. But for the third characteristic, again, the deafblind child has no way of knowing that. So how could we repeat that that interaction in a deafblind attuned way? So perhaps the carer can go over and he could tap the hand of the toddler where the toddler is, where the aunt is running over the hand. So he could tap that area and maybe even track the movement of the hand with his own finger. How about the laughing and the humor? How could that be felt? Well, when you laugh, you make sounds, but there is also a body movement associated with laughter, whether you've got a belly laugh or a chuckle or a hiccupy laugh, that laugh is going to show in your body and in the movement of your body. And that is something that can be felt. So if the carer positions themselves near the child and in contact with the child and reflects that movement back to them, the child can feel, you have noticed my laughter. So then the response is attuned, it's matching, it's empathetic. So a few little tweaks there, and we go from a response that is not attuned to a response that is attuned. So let's look at some examples I give you to think about here. Here's a deaf-blind girl sitting up. We're not sure what she's talking about. She's laughing and smiling at something. Okay, so again, that we're moving into her space, making physical contact and replicating the movements. And depending on her vision and hearing, you might do some auditory and visual matching as well. But again, that's going to depend on what she can perceive in those senses. We have a little baby lying on its back here with his feet and legs in the air, and he's grasping his toes with his hands, with the joy and excitement of just having discovered his feet. So his little hands are maybe clenching his toes and jiggling his feet around, and maybe he's squealing and laughing, or maybe he's a bit surprised. So again, by getting in physical contact, maybe lying down with the child, or maybe placing our hands near his hands and replicating the movements on his toes, you have showed him, I've noticed your surprise or your joy about discovering your toes. If you're lying down next to the child, then he's giggling and he's rocking and he's swaying. His response can also be felt through that body-to-body contact. And we have another example here. And there's an expression that I can't really read, and that's okay. If you don't know what the emotion is, that's okay, because there will be signals from them that you can still reflect back to them. It's the kind of way, I guess, the sighting and hearing way would be to maybe reflect back somebody's facial expression, even if you don't really know what their expression means. You can still attune to it. And what you can't see here, she's sitting in a high chair and her little hands are placed on her tray and pushing down really hard as she stares intently or keeps her head in one position, whether she's staring or whether she's just pausing and thinking. But we can reflect back that body position, that pressure of the hands through the tray, and we can say, I have noticed what you are feeling. So it's possible to attune even if you don't quite understand the emotion that you are attuning to, because you're reflecting back the signs, the clues, and the movement clues, and then transposing them into tactile recognition. So now we have a couple of little videos of tactile attunement, but this video is also includes some auditory attunement as well, because we are in really close proximity to the child. He's wearing hearing aids. We know that he uses his voice, and so that vocalization is potentially going to be meaningful as well, but we add a tactile attunement there as well. So I've called the video "Ooh" and "Ha ha ha" because I am reflecting back his surprise and interest, and then I'm reflecting back the humor that he responds with. So the little boy is fascinated with iPads, and he actually discovers mine. So we pause and let him have a look at it, and we're mirroring his emotions and reactions to the iPad. So there's the surprise there. And then the next one is the laughter. So the vocalizations are reflected back to him, but also his body movements were reflected back to him, and the way that I positioned myself around him, my hands under his, but my body, quite close body to body contact, I could reflect back his reactions and emotions. So he knew that they were being attuned to. This next video, I do one as a first bit as a silent video, and then I replay it with the words. So the first time I play it, I'd like you to pay attention to the attunement that happens through the hands. So the emotion is reflected back through the contact in their hands and the emotion, the movement of their hands. And then the next time I play it through with the voice and the words as well.
I wonder, can you remember me? Yes, really? Oh, that's good. It's been so long.
So at one point when the deafblind man is responding, yes, I remember you, they lose physical contact. So then he's going to lose contact with his communication partner's reaction. And so the communication partner reestablishes contact and then attunes to the excitement of being, of remembering. Yeah. So that's attunement. Co-regulation of proximity. What does that mean? So proximity is a physical closeness, but it could also be, we look at it as distance as well. So the closeness or distance from each other in the interaction. And each person, so the co-regulation, is each person is contributing to that level of closeness or distance. And they do that to give them access to the other person. They do it to a level that is needed for their safety and or to feel safe and respected. And this proximity is often closer than sighted and hearing proximity. So when you're new to deafblind interactions, that's something that sighted and hearing people often have to get used to, is that close proximity in deafblind interactions and the quite tactile nature of it as well. So body-to-body contact is a natural and informative part of deafblind interaction. The touch gives each person in that interaction a lot of information. And the proximity will change according to the interaction. It's not fixed and it will ebb and flow, and each person contributes to that. So the next one we explore proximity, I've got a series of images taken from an interaction that you might be familiar with. So this little video was played in our communication webinar. Today, I've just taken still shots from that to show how the proximity changes throughout the interaction. So both of them decide how close or far apart their bodies are going to be and how they are positioned in relation to each other, whether there's going to be physical contact or not, and where is that contact going to occur? Is it going to be, and which senses are we going to be using throughout the interaction? Which part of our interaction is accessible to which of the senses? Right, going back to that that slide. So we have a young deafblind girl lying on a resonance board, and next to her is her teacher. The deafblind girl's hand is resting on the teacher's forehead, and the teacher's arm is resting up the side of the student's body and resting over the top of one of her arms. The teacher's other arm is close by, but is not in physical contact with the student. And then the deafblind student actually regulates that proximity. So they pull their hand away from the teacher, but they move it to the back of their hand. So now their two hands are in contact, back to back, and the forearm of the teacher is still in contact with the body. And the student has removed her hand from the teacher's forehead. So now they've got back-to-back hand. And then the teacher changes the proximity. They bring their other hand into the interaction to take their turn, but they do that across the body of the student and offer their hand underneath the hand of the student, and the student accepts that and accepts that change of proximity, that the teacher is getting a lot closer to them and making physical contact with them in a different part of their body and with a different part of the teacher's body. And then the teacher withdraws that hand and rests it next to, back with her other hand and next to the hand of the student with deafblindness. So the proximity has sort of, the distance has kind of increased again. There's less body-to-body contact, but the student remains in contact with her hands and says, actually, in the next picture, she grasps the teacher's hand and says, actually, I need your hand to be here in this interaction. So the student taking control of proximity there. And then this little scene where the student pushes the teacher's hand away. They said, now that hand is too close. It needs to be away from me. But she shows the teacher where, and it's back to that original position by her side in contact with her hand. So both are contributing to the distance from each other, and they're kind of equal partners in that regulation of proximity. The next characteristic is co-regulation of tempo. So what's this mean? It means matching of pace, of rhythm, and intensity of each other's movements and gestures, of your actions, of your pauses. So this contributes to attunement. It matches the processing speed of the person with deafblindness, so it gives them the time to take things in and make sense of them. It allows that pace to ebb and flow according to the interest of the person with deafblindness, their enjoyment, and their need for information. And in the videos that are coming up, you can observe this change of tempo throughout the interactions. The next characteristic that we think about is joint attention. There are 3 types, and out of interest, I just go through them briefly, because joint attention can develop and become more complex. So I guess the earliest form of joint attention is what we'd call shared gaze. Now I've put gaze in inverted commas because when you're deafblind, you may not be using gaze to establish joint attention. So here I guess I use that loosely in form of potentially maybe a tactile kind of gaze. So the interaction partner and the deafblind person are attending to the same thing, but it is the interaction partner that is shifting their attention to match the attention of the deafblind person. Okay, so they're kind of actively there. It's the partner that's actively matching. So they're sharing because one of the person is doing the work around joint attention. But in dyadic joint attention, dyadic meaning two, it's the interaction partner and the deafblind person attending to each other, and each of them know that the other person is attending to them. Okay? So all these things happen really, really naturally when there is vision involved in joint attention, and it happens really early in development when the young person has full vision and full control of their eye movements. This joint attention can happen really quickly and really naturally, but in deafblindness, we have to do joint attention a little bit differently, and mostly through touch. So the most complex form of joint attention is triadic or three-way. So each of the partners in the interaction are attending to the same thing, which I'm going to call it. And each of them know that the other is attending to it and to each other. So I'm attending to you, you're attending to me. I know that I'm attending to you, and you know that and I know that you're attending to me. And I know that we're both attending to this other thing, this it. Could be an object, could be something that you're observing, but whatever it is that you're attending to, you have an awareness that the other person is attending to it, as well as whatever it is that you're doing. So as mentioned, in a hearing and sighted world, this is mostly through eye contact and movement of your eye gaze. And there may be some auditory and gestural kind of like pointing involved as well. But a lot of it, again, appeals to the vision and the auditory senses. So joint attention in deafblindness often is translated into joint touch. And then one more characteristic before we move into another video is turn taking. So in true turn taking, each person can lead, each person can follow, and they do that interchangeably in a sequence. So the kind of things that are involved in turn taking, or the skills, is you need to be able to take a turn. You need to be able to leave your turn when your turn is finished. You need to be able to give a turn to the other person. And when it's your turn, you need to be able to keep your turn until your turn is finished. So this is happening with both partners back and forth in a really kind of fluid way. And our next video is demonstrating a lot of these principles that I've just talked about. So in this interaction, which is sharing a drum, we have a massive drum sitting on its side on a resonance board, and next to the drum is a little deafblind student who is about the same size of the drum, and the drum is possibly even bigger than she is. And I come and meet her for the first time and start joining in her drumming with her. So this is very child-led. I start with shared gaze, but throughout the interaction, it becomes triadic. It becomes more three-way as the interaction evolves. We are regulating our proximity to each other, so you'll see us move closer and further apart throughout that interaction. I said there's regulation of tempo, and initially that's me that's doing the regulating of the tempo, but as the interaction evolves, there's definitely a kind of a mutual contribution to that, the tempo of our interaction. And then in regards to the turn taking, a little deafblind student can definitely take a turn. She definitely leaves the room for a turn. She definitely keeps her own turn. I'm just not sure being involved in that interaction. Was she giving me a turn, or was I just having to take a turn? And I think it sort of evolves through. And sometimes it's really hard to watch and make those decisions. Sometimes you have to be in the interaction and actually tactilely feeling whether you have a turn or not, or whether you are sort of jumping in and taking a turn from them. Okay, so let's have a watch. Yeah. So she's noticed that something's changed.
Different.
And it's like, what is that? What is that? And I was like, hello, Gracie. Hello, Gracie. So there I've done my little introduction. So again, she's meeting me for the first time. You know, this thing that approaches her, she might not even know that it's a person. So there's that little bit of time for her to, you know, explore me. I'm also reflecting back her actions and, you know, saying hello, doing a little greeting. I'm presenting her with a little tactile object on my wrist, my personal signature, just offering that there, like, oh, feel this strange thing about me, feel this unique thing about me. And then she starts initiating some rhythm with her feet. And I thought, oh, okay, time to get the greeting ritual over, time to join in with, you know, this conversation and this interaction that you are starting. But I know that I can't do that when I'm sitting next to her. So what I do is I lie down next to her and imitate. I put myself in the same position, body position that she has. The other thing I should probably mention is this recording took place in the midst of lots of other things happening. So there were people observing, there were people having conversations about what they were observing. And when that's kind of interfering with the video, I've actually cut the sound out. So that's why some of the sound disappears at the time, so that you can kind of focus on the movement, the proximity, the turn taking, without being distracted by all the noise that's going on in the background. Time to
Get you guys a small drum like that.
A little change up there. So she introduces something else to the interaction, is that the leg tapping. I reflect that back to her. We're getting closer, we're getting further apart, depending on who is what. Then she starts the leg tapping. When she started the leg tapping, I felt like I was too far away from her for her to be able to feel, look, my leg is tapping too, your leg is tapping, my leg is tapping too. So I changed the proximity. I got close to her and she accepted that. So that's where I stayed. And then she, you know, that ebbs and flows depending on the movement and the comfort and what she's telling me. Oh, and we'll come back to that video because we add another dimension to it a little bit later on. Okay, so often in deafblind interactions, it's not unusual to have a sense of, I don't really know what's going on here. I'm this interaction partner, but I don't know what's going on. I don't understand what's happening, but that shouldn't worry you too much. If you follow the principles of high quality interaction, sometimes it doesn't matter so much that you don't understand, and sometimes that just understanding emerges from the interaction. So if you feel like you don't know what's going on and you don't really understand, that's all the more reason to follow and receive, and we will talk about receiving soon, rather than lead. Okay, so adults often have an agenda and they like to lead. They like to think, I need to teach you something, I need to show you something. So they just kind of take the child through this interaction without actually leaving space for the deafblind child or the deafblind person to do what they need to do in that interaction as well. So if you're unsure, all the more reason to follow and let go of the lead. If the deafblind person is leading, they will lead you to and help you understand things from their perspective. And bit by bit, you will better understand how they are gathering information from their surroundings. And eventually, you can open up more of the world to them, and they will be happy and confident and curious to follow you if they know that you will also follow them. So now let's start just kind of talk strategies. How do we actually get these components of high quality interaction into our interactions? Well, firstly, you've got to start an interaction. So I've kind of created these little diagrams to help you take you through that process. So the first thing you would do is pause and wait and observe. And then depending on what you see, you are waiting for the deafblind person to do something. Yep. And you're observing and waiting for that. You're letting them lead and make their first move, I guess, if you could put it like that. And then when they have done that, you receive the deafblind person's action. And again, I'll come to receiving. And once you've received that, you might then go and pause and wait for the next thing. So you go back to the beginning of the cycle at that point. So in the little drumming video that you saw, that's what I was doing. I was just receiving her drumming and showing the student, I noticed you're drumming. You drummed like this. You tapped like this. You drummed like this. You tapped like this. I saw that. I saw that. I saw that. So I wasn't so much responding or taking my own turn. I was just receiving her turn. So that was kind of the interaction you saw there. And I was just following her lead. But as interactions develop, sometimes you actually can make your own, you can do your own response. So if I was to do a response in the drumming video, I might have added my own rhythm or my own tapping rather than just responding and receiving hers, okay? But then you can exit and enter in that kind of circular way through that interaction. So you can follow the green path, you can follow then the green, the yellow, back to the beginning, and then back out of the green, and then down to the yellow, round and round and round. Yeah. And that's often the kind of interaction style that you might need when somebody is learning about interaction and engaging in an interaction. You can extend an interaction when the deafblind person is ready for that and has the skill to do that. So they might then leave room in that interaction for you to respond. So you receive, but then respond. And then as the interaction continues as well, often there could be a degree of repetition and predictability about that interaction. And then you can add something that changes it up, a little bit of variation or change there. And later we will see how the drumming, how I introduce some variation into the drumming routine and the reaction that gets from a little deafblind student. So adding variation, it makes room in the interaction for the person who's been following to then maybe have a turn at leading. So the interaction becomes a little more reciprocal. But what I will often see in deafblind interactions is that the adult leads. They skip the pause and wait, that very first step, and they lead in with something that they want to show the child or they want the child to experience. And often they'll lead with the kind of response that they think the child should make. So here's a toy, this is the way you play with it. This is a spoon, this is what we do with it. So all very, absolutely noble intentions. I want you to learn a little bit about the world. And so they will lead in with a very sighted and hearing kind of response for the child. They might notice the child's reaction, but they might do it in a way that the child has no idea that they've been noticed. So the interaction partner might be observing, but they're not receiving. And then they might respond to what they see. They might add variation, and again, around the second. But what's being left out is that pausing and waiting and that opportunity for the child to lead and to be received, and that lead to be received. But if we do kind of follow those first two cycles, what then develops is what I call a developed interaction style, or a reciprocal interaction, or an interaction that has reciprocity. Okay, so it's each of the people in the interaction takes on all the roles in this very fluid and interchangeable way. So each of them can pause and wait and observe the other. By observe, I don't necessarily mean just with the eyes and the ears, I mean with the body as well. They will let the person lead, but they can also take the lead. They can receive the other's actions. They can respond to the other's actions, and they can both add variation. And that can be done in all sorts of order, back and forward, up and down, round and round. And so the interaction becomes reciprocal. There's mutual exchanges, we're equal partners in this interaction. The deafblind person can shift between initiating and responding. They can gain the attention of the interaction partner. They can attend to their interaction partner. And the interaction contains all or many components of high quality interaction. Okay, so why let the deafblind person lead? Well, it's especially important when understanding of interaction is developing, because it shows you the deafblind person's area of interest. What the deafblind person does makes sense to them, and that's what you want to understand as well. And the way that you interact with that thing probably makes not much sense to them, because you're doing it from a hearing and or sighted perspective, and they are doing it from a deafblind perspective. So it's the interactions partner's responsibility to try and move into that deafblind world or that deafblind experience as much as possible to gain whatever understanding they can from that. And you can't do that by leading. You can only do that by following. Okay. So that helps you understand what makes sense to the deafblind person. It encourages their active engagement. If they have to take a turn, and if you're going to wait for that, if nothing's going to happen until they have a turn, then it encourages their activity. It encourages their ability to initiate, and it discourages passiveness. And then they know if they are active, it's going to be noticed, and that's going to become part of the interaction. And letting them leads it might take time, but it's more likely to lead to a sustained interaction. What I think in our young deafblind learners, they are quite able to initiate. They're doing little movements, all sorts of things, maybe very subtle things, but they are leading and they are initiating things. As I think sometimes in adults with deafblindness who are sort of still at this early interaction stage, or have maybe been through a period of life where the kind of contact that they have from people is about people doing things for them or to them, but not so much with them. So they lose the skill, I think, to interact and to initiate. So sometimes you kind of have to go back to these beginnings and these principles when establishing interaction with a deafblind adult who maybe doesn't have much formal language or formal communication, and give them a chance to relearn this way of being with people. Why do we offer touch? Well, if your vision is fragmented, if your hearing is fragmented, maybe your sense of touch is going to be your dominant sense. And this is a way of letting the person with the deafblindness know that you are still there and where you are. The deafblind person can know that you are still paying attention to what's going on between you. If your attention shifts, they can feel that. A lot of our, whether we know it or not, our emotions can be felt by someone else in our body. So if you are in physical contact, your emotional reaction can be felt, and you potentially can feel the emotional reaction of the deafblind person as well. And your actions can be felt, or inverted commas, observed by the person with deafblindness. So it's a very informative sense in deafblindness. Why do we pause and wait? Well, that creates opportunity for the person with deafblindness to process and think about what is happening. So they can set the pace. I need this much time to think about this or make sense of this or even notice this. And then they've got to make decisions. Am I going to respond to this? What am I going to do? So it gives them that space and that time to initiate action or respond to whatever it is that they've noticed. It gives them the opportunity to learn about the back and forth nature of social interaction and conversation. It allows them to be the active contributor rather than the passive receiver. And they can learn that they can influence their interaction or their communication partner, and they can influence the interaction. So why do we need to observe responses or reactions, or how do we do that in deafblindness? So a lot of the time in hearing and or sighted interactions, we are looking at people's faces quite intently for reactions. Or if we are blind, we are listening intently to the voices and the subtleties of their voice for those clues to how they are responding. But in deafblindness, those things might be fragmented or absent. But as a communication partner, we are observing the whole of the deafblind person. So we're looking and listening, but we're also feeling for movement. We're looking and feeling for movement, including the feet and including breathing as well. So these sometimes are things that we don't look about because we're so intent on looking at the upper half of the body that we miss what the feet and legs are doing, but also the way that the pattern and the speed and the depth or the shallowness of someone's breathing can give us a lot of clues about maybe what's happening inside them, and then their reactions to things. Yes, we do continue to observe facial expression and vocalization, but I would also include bodily functions in that. So I've had deafblind students who burp and let wind pass and regurgitate from their stomachs, and they're controlling all these or contributing these bodily functions as part of the interaction. Okay? Sometimes it's things, maybe it's some of the few things that they can control and can contribute. So be on the lookout for everything that a body might do. So your observations will help you understand the deafblind experience and what is meaningful to them. And it's often not predictable or conventional. So if you come to that with your sighted hearing lenses, you might be missing the deafblind part of that experience. And finally, to this word receiving, what is it that she means? We'll look at this a little bit more closely. So receiving is imitating or reflecting back the actions or responses that you have observed. And again, usually it's facial expression. And that's why in deafblindness, we give it its own name. Because it needs to be very explicit and thought about. How you're going to receive needs to be thought about in deafblind interactions. So you need to receive in a way that can be perceived by the person with deafblindness, and that they know that it's coming from you. Yep, it's not just some other person, it's not some other object that's landing on their body or touching in that way, that it's you, their interaction partner, who is doing that to them. Receiving communicates you have noticed the action or emotion and shows them where your attention is. So sometimes a deafblind person can be doing multiple things at once, and you notice one of them, and that's what you respond to. So the deafblind person needs to know, this thing that I was doing with my hands, that is what they responded to. Or this thing I was doing with my leg or my feet, that is what they responded to, not this thing that was going on with my head, and not this thought that I was having, or not this feeling in my tummy. They're not responding to any of those things, but they're responding to this action down in this part of my body. And so the receiving has to happen usually through touch or replicating some rhythm, some aspect of that movement back to them and in the kind of area of the body that it happened. And I'll show you some videos so it will make a little bit more sense what this receiving is. And it indicates what action you have observed and what it is they have done that you are responding to. It links their action with your response. I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of maybe hearing and sighted receiving or not receiving that goes on. So someone might say, I'm thinking of buying a new car. So receiving that message might look something like, or go something like, oh, you're thinking of buying a new car. I'm reflecting back that I have I've heard their message. Yep. So it's not really responding to what they've said. It's just it's receiving it, or it's reflecting back that you've noticed their message. Yep. And then the normal thing is to maybe respond to it. So it might be, oh, you think you're buying a new car? The response then might go, what type of car are you looking at? Or the response might be, oh, why do you need a new car? Or the response might be, oh, what color car are you going to get? So the receiving is actually different to the response, okay? And this is what we need to really articulate closely in our deaf-blind interactions. We need to receive before we respond. Okay. So let's look at some deaf-blind receiving. This sort of video has two little parts and there's a little pause in the middle. And it's the two of them going for a walk and just discovering things on the way as part of that walk. And the first is the plant by the front door, noticing the plant by the front door, and a little bit later it's noticing the fence down the road. And the communication partner wearing the green cardigan is receiving the initiations or the actions of the deafblind person that she's walking with. And she does that by just imitating the kind of action that the deafblind person is taking with the leaves. She's just imitating and reflecting it back to her, which is saying, I notice you are interested or you are feeling these leaves. So here the deafblind person is quite fascinated with this fence, and she's stroking it. So whether she is gathering information about, the characteristics of the fence, or the fence that just kind of feels nice, we don't really know, but we do know she's really interested in this fence. And the communication partner receives that by joining in that action of stroking the fence with her. And you see the deafblind person is even regulating the partner's attention as well, because when the partner moves her hand away from the fence, the deafblind person reaches back for the hand and said, come on, back here, keep paying attention. We're exploring the fence, keep paying attention. So there's some receiving, but there's also this kind of co-regulation of proximity as well, which is and joint attention. We'll keep going with the fence. And the other thing I like about this is that the interaction partner just stays with her in that interaction for as long as it's interesting and as long as it's informative. She doesn't go, well, come on, we've felt the fence, let's keep going. You know, we're here for a walk, we're not here to discover the fence. But the fence is part of the walk, and as a hearing or sighted person, you would be taking in that fence all the way down the block and absorbing that information. But in the deafblind way, you maybe need to stop and you need to feel and explore it that way and learn about it that way. And there's that time and space to do that, but also the noticing. Oh yeah, you're feeling the fence, you're feeling the fence. So the next one is receiving some piano playing, and just notice. So, you know, they're in a close proximity, they're sitting next to each other on the piano stool. And some people might think, well, that's enough. You know, I'm sitting here, they must know that I am attending to them. But you can sit next to someone and not be attending to them. You could be attending to somebody else that's in the room. You could be watching a fly on the wall. You could be looking at what's going on in the window, or you could be thinking about something completely different. So even though you're sitting next to each other, how does the deafblind person know that you're actually attending to what they're doing? And this is how our interaction partner chooses to do that. Her hand is very gently resting over the top as he plays the piano, which says, you're playing the piano. So what our eye gaze would tell somebody who can see it, the hand is doing that instead. As the hand moves down the piano, the interaction partner's hand moves along very gently, doesn't interfere, is just, you know, that very interested observer. This example is receiving signing. So the difference here is this person signs toilet. And then in the next little segment, they sign coffee. And I do pause. This person signs very, very quickly. So I do actually pause and freeze frame the video so you can see the sign happening and kind of give you a chance to pay attention to it. And the conversation goes a bit like this. So the deafblind person goes, toilet. And the interaction partner signs back toilet to them, and then they go, yes. So they've taken that as a request to toilet, but they go, this is what I'm responding to. I saw you sign toilet. Yeah, okay. So they receive it and then they respond to it, rather than just going, I saw you sign toilet. Yes, we can go. So that receiving bit is put in there. It's not just assumed, and the same for coffee. Is that pausing? And then she signs toilet back into her hand, and then she signs yes into her hand, and then they show it, but they then go off to the toilet to work out, you know, what the message is about toilet. And then this next one is coffee coming up. So there's that little attached to my coffee, and then communication partner signs coffee back into her hand. Coffee, yes. Coffee, yes. So the sign is received before it's responded to. And then this one is receive the little deafblind student, the activity is a book. So there's a book with a lot of real objects in it, and the book also has Braille on each page, and that's the activity they're going in. But instead of launching into the book activity, the teacher is actually receiving the child and the child's actions before any of that happens, and following the child's lead. So the child leads the interaction, and there's all these unique gestures that the child is doing, and the teacher is receiving them. She's noticing them, and she's reflecting that back to the child. Oh, I noticed this, I noticed this, I noticed this. And the interaction is about those unique gestures well before it's about the book. So most people would, enter into that interaction, like, here's the book, okay, touch the spoon, turn the page, touch the next object, in the way that sighted hearing people might proceed through a book. And the child has to follow the teacher's lead through the book. But what this teacher does is has the book there, but follows the child's lead through that to see how that activity is going to unfold. And by doing this, this activity is going to unfold in a way that makes sense to the child, at a pace that the child can manage. And it starts off as an interaction between people, like a deafblind gestural chat. That's how I would describe it. It's a gestural chat, and it's tactile. The book really isn't even part of that interaction until the child brings the book into the interaction, until she's noticed and she's ready to bring that into the interaction. The whole clip is nearly 3 minutes long, but I've chopped out little bits just to sort of accelerate the process. But know that what you're seeing is actually taking much longer than it appears to in this video. And then once the child shows the teacher the part of the book that they're interested in, the teacher receives that gesture too. And then she adds a body sign that matches what the child is doing and what the child's tapping on, which is the Braille on the page. And in this particular interaction, they don't get to the spoon or any other conventional way of exploring a book. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. They've had a sustained interaction. The child has developed an awareness of the book's existence and something about the first page and the really interesting bumps on that page, the bumps that we know as Braille. They probably found the Braille on the page way before the teacher was even thinking about it or thinking about introducing it. And what's even more important is that they still have this connected, attuned relationship. And that student is going to come back to that activity next time with curiosity and without fear. So let's have a watch. It doesn't look like a sighted and hearing interaction. So think about the receiving, thinking about the child leading, thinking about the tempo, thinking about the proximity.
Oh.
The mossy thing, waddle thing, keep going. And this is.
So the little black bits are the bits I've chopped out.
That was me, that doesn't count.
Didn't see you touching.
What did he hear?
And we get the tapping on the book.
Braille.
She's got the Braille fingers.
Yeah,
Okay, the child finally leads the interaction to the book, and there's that interesting bit that they find there. So I am aware that some of this video has become a little bit fuzzy. In our recording that we will release, in wherever the video has become fuzzy, I will put in the original high quality video, high resolution video, so that you can see that without fuzzy, and then you'll get the video with the commentary as well.
Oh.
Up the mossy bank waddled the chicky bird, and this is what he heard. Yes, you see? That was me, that doesn't count.
You can see it touching.
What did he hear?
Braille.
She's got the braille fingers.
Yeah, Braille.
Okay, so we've received. Now let's respond. So this can sometimes take time for the interaction partner to actually get the chance to respond. So they might receive, and then the child might take another turn, or they might receive and then get an opportunity to respond as well. But that response has to be done in a way that can be perceived by the person with deafblindness. Responding helps them understand the communicative nature of their actions. It encourages continuation of initiating movement and actions, and it helps establish the back and forth nature of social interaction and communication. It can provide some information about language, but it doesn't have to at this stage of development. So this one is about waiting, observing, receiving, and responding. And you'll notice the length of time of waiting. Yeah. And as said, deafblind interactions don't look like hearing and sighted interactions, and they don't feel like hearing and sighted interactions. But as you practice them more, they become natural and they make sense.
Nearly finished its coffee. Is it all gone? Is it finished? Oh, that's a good back rub. I've got long hair, you've got short hair.
There is no audio in this particular part of the video. That's been taken out because the nature of this interaction is mostly tactile, and you can see that the interaction partner is waiting for the person with deafblindness to lead. They're sitting near them, they are in contact, so the back of their hand is in contact with the deafblind person's forearm, and they're just waiting. It's, you lead this interaction. And sometimes it takes a lot of waiting for something to happen, or something that you can receive and respond to.
Oh, nearly finished its coffee.
So there's that receiving of this kind of little
All
kind of
gone.
bit
Is it finished?
at the end of the cup of coffee.
Mm.
But again, that pausing and waiting, I'm just reflecting back and receiving what is it you are going, what are you going to bring to this interaction? And I'm waiting for, I'm waiting for that. And then see that the deafblind person sort of starts tapping the table. And again, that's received in a tactile way. I'll just tap, tap, tap. And it might be communicative, it might not. We just don't know yet. Oops, sorry. Tricky bit with the film again. So we get back to the tapping on the table and like, oh, you finish your coffee, the finishing, so that big arm movement, acknowledging that, and the empty cup. So now, oh, look, now
gone.
I've noticed that too.
Finished. Mm.
And the waiting, and then the receiving, the tapping on the table. And then we get an initiation of
Oh, it's a good
true
back rub.
there. It's like, hey, hello there. And that's received in terms of
Long hair. You've got short hair.
so whatever he's doing, the interaction partner is just reflecting back to him so that he knows that that's being noticed. So we let an interaction routine or sequence develop through this process. It keeps our turns going. We keep the turns going as long as the person is engaged. We keep pausing and receiving and potentially responding. And we may notice patterns or sequences emerging. And then there's another step. So, once we notice this pattern or sequence, we might then want to introduce some novelty. And novelty is just something new to the interaction, something else, something unknown, something unexpected, a variation to the pattern, maybe a variation to the familiar. It doesn't have to be a massive surprise. It can be just a really little subtle change. And this builds in turn taking. It shows the person with deaf blindness an aspect of something they may not have discovered by themselves. It encourages curiosity and exploration, and it's a way of extending an interaction. So we go back to our creating beats, and then I add in some novelty. And I do that by changing the rhythm of what's happened. So I've got this matching rhythm. She beats, I beat, she pauses, I pause. So the time that I wait before banging reflects the time that she waits. I use the same body parts. I use the same rhythm. I use the same intensity. And this is going on in quite a predictable way until, and she's expecting, oh, now you're gonna respond now. You're gonna respond now. And she waits for it and she's expecting it. And my choice of novelty here is to stop responding. Right? That wouldn't be everybody's choice in any situation. There might be, novelty might have been, oh, look, maybe we can bring the beads into this, the beads that are on the jam, maybe we can bring them in. Or maybe I'm going to start tapping in a really different rhythm. I'm going to start tapping really fast, or I'm going to tapping really slow, or I'm going to do big, long bangs. Oh, I changed something. There could be so many choices of what you would do for novelty. In this particular situation, I decide to change the tempo and I wait a really long time before receiving. And we'll see how she response.
She's just starting doing things like that.
Yeah, so that's what we've been doing. I've been trying to get her to go from slapping to knocking. Let's see.
It's a competition right there. You mark you on the curriculum right now, Grace. What else have I found?
Bottom. So this part of the interaction you would have seen already earlier in the webinar, but then another layer is that.
She's just starting doing things like that.
Yeah, so that's what we've been doing. I've been trying to get her to go from slapping to knocking. Let's see.
It's a competition right there. You mark you on the curriculum right now, Grace. What else have I found?
So there she's noticed that I've stopped responding. And I'm really curious to know what she does. And I'm a bit distracted, but I do notice eventually. So she adds her own variation. She changes the rhythm, she changes the body movement. Yep, and then so in this situation, that variation just gave me a lot more insight into her thinking, yep, and her ways. She's thinking, okay, well, this interaction stopped and I was quite enjoying it. How do I what do I got to do to keep this going? What have I got to do to bring this person back into the interaction? And she changes the movement. She experiments with different movements and adds this kind of hip raise and hip bang into the interaction. Yeah. But you don't often get those insights unless you are following. If you're letting them lead, you get these insights. If you are leading, you often don't get those insights. We're offering hand under theirs, so we give control to the person with deaf blindness to follow when curious or withdraw when uncertain, provides opportunity to follow someone else's lead, establishes trust and confidence to explore a way to show new or undiscovered aspects. And we have a whole webinar on hand under hand if you want to understand more about that, that concept. Okay, we're coming actually running out of time. This next video I am going to add into the recording. We're going to skip over it now, but I'll add it back into the recording so you can enjoy that.
Here's my cuppa. I've got a cuppa too. I've got a cup of tea. The tea bag. Yeah, tea bag. You got a coffee. Your cup warm? Yeah, mine's really warm. Really warm cup. Hot. It's my hair.
Do you want to talk a bit, Mary? I'll get another camera for when you're going to do the dance.
Yeah, okay. Yep, sure. Yep, no worries. Nearly finished your coffee. Is it all gone? Is it finished? Oh, that's a good back rub. I've got long hair, you've got short hair. That's a good rub. Tap, tap. I've still got a bit of tea. Still got some more tea here. Did you want to do some more dancing? Do you want to have some dancing? What do you think? Or just more back rub? Do you want to stand up?
Again, with circle time again. So these are just more examples of high quality interaction that are incorporating examples of all those characteristics.
Feel the roots. Off. Or on. What do you think? It's up to you. I'm going to shoe off. Put your shoe on. I'm going to keep them on. Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's good. Caleb?
Anyway,
Yes.
so
Caleb.
Hello, Caleb.
Hi, Caleb. That's you. Hello, Caleb.
so then they go.
Hello, Caleb. Hello,
Caleb, it's time to say.
Hi. Hi, Caleb. Good work. Hi. Oh yeah. Hi.
Okay, a quick look at resources. So all these principles of high quality interactions are discussed in depth in the first 2 and 3 volumes of this publication, Communication and Congenital Deaf Blindness. I've put the URL there. It's a resource that is disappearing fast. And it contains descriptions, but also a number of videos, many videos of high quality interactions. I would encourage our other webinars in this series around early communication, communication decision making, life space model, hand under hand, all contribute to this the content in this webinar, and you can find those webinars, as I said, in early communication, but also in our news section under past webinars. This tactile language, if you can see it and you can support it, is a downloadable booklet that covers these concepts and other examples, and there's also a webinar series about it called Circle Model. Interaction and Early Language Centre section from the National Centre on Deaf Blindness. And the Washington Deaf Blind Program also has some videos under their communication section about quality interactions. And we might have time for one question. I'm really sorry that you didn't get to ask question. It's such a dense topic. And also encourage you to come back and look at the recording, because it will have those extra videos in there where you can see those principles, all come together. Okay, so that's just a minute to see if there are any questions or any comments there. Okay, this one here. Can quality interactions such as the examples shown be used to bridge formal communication? They certainly can. And I think there's an example of in the receiving your gestures where they've got the tactile book in front of them, and then the child finds the braille and starts tapping and running her fingers over the braille, and then the teacher shares that gesture and they establish that meaning of like these bumps on the page, and then the teacher provides that. She does braille into the child's hand. She does a sign for braille into the child's hands. So there's that adding in of formal language. But all that process that went into that, rather than going, little girl, touch this part of the book, feel these bumps, this is Braille, the interaction emerges and is led by the child. So then that feeling of the page and the information that's provided about those bumps becomes much more meaningful. Okay, any advice for those who may be deafblind and have severe disabilities as well? My very quick answer is sometimes getting them on the floor or into giving them a little bit more opportunity and freedom to move. So often their seating is very supportive, which doesn't facilitate a lot of movement. So talking to your physical therapist about how can we position ourselves together, maybe on the floor in body-to-body contact, and just explore what kind of movement might be possible. And you'll be looking at really tiny movements to receive and respond to. What's the best way to show that you are tired to a deafblind child, especially when they keep repeating the same body movement, especially congenitally deafblind child? So I'm not sure whether it's whether the deafblind child is tired or whether you as the interaction partner is tired, possibly through a natural body movement of being tired. When you're tired, maybe you go floppy and you stop doing what you're doing. So you just sort of maybe withdraw from the interaction by becoming still and floppy and moving away bit by bit. That's maybe one idea. I don't know. It's going to have to be a very, very individual thing. Comment here. I appreciate that. I enjoyed the presentation. Well done to all. Thank you so much. I'm going to end there and say thank you to our interpreters, Naomi and Megan today, and our captioner, Lee. And thank you so much for all the people who contributed videos to our webinars. Your generosity has helped our learning so much. So farewell. This pretty much rounds up our webinar series and our project.